Welcome to the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast, powered by the Snowbird US Day Tracker app. I'm your host, Gerry Scott, and my goal is to give you answers to your cross-border questions, to ease the stress of a cross-border move or extended trip, and to keep you up to date on all you need to know with cross-border rules and regulations. Now let's get on with the show. Well, welcome back to the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast. I'm Gerry Scott. Today we're going to be tackling a topic that can surprise a lot of Canadians who have spent time living or working in the United States, and it's the U.S. exit tax. And I've got my good friend, the expert. I started calling him the co-host. He's been on this podcast more than almost myself. But we're also going to basically talk about if you're a green card holder or considering giving it up. And there's also an important rule called the 8 out of 15-year rule that could have significant tax implications. And of course, the cat's has been let out of the bag. I've got Robert with me today from Victoria. Robert, once again, tell us what you're up to these days, what your firm is focusing on, and then I'm going to jump into these questions. I've got 7 what appear to be tough questions for myself, but a man of your intelligence.
They're still tough questions.
Okay.
So I'll do my best.
Okay.
Well, yeah, we work for CanadAmerican Tax, ISACOF Chartered Accountants, and we focus on cross-border issues, right? Personal, corporate partnerships, structuring, etc. So, and in this topic, we handle lots of folks, former green card holders or current green card holders that move back to Canada. They need to, one, figure out what do you do with your green card? Do I abandon it? Do I keep it? Do I let it expire? And second, how about the taxes, right? Are there implications for that person in the event that they surrender the green card, right? Okay. And just for the viewers, there's only one way really to surrender the green cards, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, and just I don't think I was being teased about my fancy shirt today, but my wife does like to dress me. And every once in a while, she'll hide my favorite clothes, and I have to kind of go through the closet and what's available. So no, this is not a major sponsor on the podcast yet, but I'm sure with all the viewers we have, we will start wearing some swag from some of these distributors.
Sure.
Okay, so here we are. Very first questions. Many Canadians have heard of the U.S. exit tax, but don't really understand it. What exactly is the exit tax, and why does it in the U.S. impose it on people who give up citizenship or their green cards?
Well, there's really no rational reason why they do it other than maybe it's a form of punishment for folks that dare to surrender their U.S. citizenship or abandon their green card status, right? Lawful permanent residency status. So basically what it is, and, it's very similar to Canada's departure tax. So it's a mark-to-market tax. You determine for U.S. purposes what your net worth is on the day you renounce or the day you abandon your green card. So that's your fair market value. Follows the same rules as the estate tax. Then we need to figure out what your basis is, right? Cost basis, stocks, your bonds, your retirement accounts, RSPs, real property that you own, any personal assets, etc. The difference is your net gain. It's not a real gain. It's just a deemed gain. And if your asset values less any like mortgages or liabilities is $2 million US or greater, then you're considered what's called a covered expat, right? And then the gain that we calculate would be subject to an exit tax, with one difference from Canada. The US has a rather generous credit that would be available. So it exempts almost a little over $800,000 of that gain from any tax considerations. A big caveat to that, deferred compensation items, right? Other than OAS, CPP, US Social Security. But if you've got RSPs, 401ks, etc., then and you're a covered expat, you'll lose 30%. That's the tax rate if you're deemed a covered expat. But if you're under the 2 million, or if you were born a dual citizen, give you a couple examples, and I see this all the time, just saw it yesterday. Canadian resident, born in the United States to two Canadian citizen parents, dual citizen at birth. Born in the United States on terra firma, boom, you're a U.S. person. Born abroad to two Canadian citizen parents, by birth, you're a Canadian citizen. If you were born a dual national, you cannot be considered a covered expat. That's one of the exclusions, the exemptions, right?
That's interesting because we're dealing with a young lady in Calgary. So she's moved back from the East Coast of the United States, was there for the last 20, 30 years. She's a Canadian citizen and she's a U.S. citizen. And now she wants to go through this renouncing process.
So yeah, here's the big difference for her. She likely naturalized as a U.S. person.
Yes.
Yeah. So she was not born a dual citizen.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, she would be subject if she's over the $2 million threshold.
Well, she would be considered a covered expat.
Covered expat.
Okay. Now here's something else that you and I have discussed a few times as we work on client files together. Can you explain the 8 out of 15 year rule for green card holders?
Yeah, and that's for lawful permanent residents, green card, old term they used back in the, probably the 19 teens all the way up in the 1970s. I think they were literally green cards. So the rule is if you're a long-term resident of the United States, status lawful permanent resident. So it's not going to apply to someone who is in the United States for 10 years on an H-1B or a TN visa, student visas, etc. It's just for lawful permanent residents, those green card holders. So if at any point in the last 8 out of the 15 tax years preceding abandonment of that green card, you'll be considered a long-term resident, whereby the Section 877 or that 8854, right? The analysis, whether you're a covered expat or your tax liability meets a certain threshold, or you're not compliant with your tax filings in the United States. And it can just be for one day, right? Say you got your green card January 1st, year one. Well, that counts for that you're a lawful permanent resident. Even though it was one day in that 1 year, it still counts toward that 8 out of 15, right? So if you're a green card holder and you're over the $2 million threshold, but you're under the 8 out of 15 and you're living in Canada and you've never abandoned your green card, you better start abandoning. And then as long as you abandon prior to meeting that 8 out of 15 threshold, you will not be considered a covered expat. And we've had several situations like that. Maybe they were 7 years out of the 8. And so we'd quickly abandon and then filed their final U.S. tax return without the 8854, because it's not required. They did not meet, the 8 out of the 15. They're not considered a long-term permanent resident of the United States. Done. We've had other situations where, and a lot of people don't realize this, but many, many taxpayers think that by virtue of their green card simply expiring, right? There's a 10-year shelf life on that card, that miraculously they no longer are considered green card holders. That's not true. That's erroneous information. There's a procedure that you have to follow in order to officially abandon that green card with the U.S. government. And if you don't follow that, for tax purposes, that green card can be expired for 30 years. You're still going to be subject to income tax. You're still going to be subject to requirements of filing U.S. income taxes until that green card is officially abandoned.
We'll be right back.
Attention, Canadian snowbirds. Want to enjoy your U.S. stay without worrying about immigration windows, tax rules, or accidentally overstaying? Meet Snowbirds U.S. Day Tracker. This mobile app helps you track your days in the U.S., log multi-year trips, and monitor your U.S. tax and visa exposure, all from your phone. It's designed specifically for Canadians traveling south for the winter. Stop guessing, stay compliant. Download Snowbirds US Day Tracker now and get peace of mind on your next cross-border adventure. Visit snowbirdsusdaytracker.com to get the download link, or look for a link in the show description for this episode. Have a plan before you land, and make your time in the sun about living well, not worrying about rules.
Now, do you find that some people that, we always hear this term, surrendering your green card at the border.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll talk about that for a second, but let's also talk about if you don't surrender it, and what is the time frame that if you come to Canada for 1 or 2 years and then you decide to go back?
Well, I believe, if you leave Canada for more than 6 months, it's assumed, at least by U.S. immigration folks, that you're abandoning. Now, again, it's driven purely on intent, right? So if your intent was just to be temporarily in Canada, maybe a year or two, and then return to the United States, you would want to express that to the entry officer, and likely they're not going to pull your green card. But I mean, if you've been in Canada for years and you're still a green card holder, you might get that question, are you really moving back to the United States? And if you say no, they'll have you check in and they'll take the green card from you, right?
I came across
You do
another.
have rights of appeal, though. You can appeal it to immigration court all the way up through district court,
Yeah.
even the Supreme Court if you want. Yeah.
So before I ask this next question, so what happens if that process looked like I'm going to surrender my green card? I'm leaving the United States. I'm giving up my green card. Do I just say that as I'm driving across or as I'm flying across? What is that?
No, there's actual paperwork that needs to be completed, and it needs to be delivered to the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service per their instructions, right? Need to make sure, though, before you pull the plug, that you're not considered a covered expat, right? So in other words, if you've been a green card holder for 12 years, right, you better have a look at your assets, tax filings, etc., and then draw the conclusion that you are not considered a covered expat for U.S. tax purposes. If you've been a green card holder, beginning with the year it was issued up through the date you intend to abandon, it better be under those 8 years, right? Because then you would be on the same level as a U.S. citizen who decides to renounce, right? You're considered, a U.S. person, even as a green card holder, for tax purposes, and you would be considered a covered expat if it's for 8 years of, 8 years or more of being a covered expat in that last 15.
Do you ever find that people, let's say, for example, here's my scenario. Fred comes back to Canada. He's been in the United States. He's had a green card. He's an uncovered expat, so he's got less than $2 million. He surrenders his green card. He's back in Canada, and then 6 months later he says, "Oh, I hate Canada. I want to go back to the States." Is there an opportunity there to restart your green card? Is there a window? Nothing.
Nope. It's you don't get a second chance. If you're going to abandon, you have to start over.
Okay.
Which nowadays is almost impossible, unless you have like a U.S. citizen spouse or even children, right, that live in the United States. Then you have a chance. You could probably get a green card back relatively soon. But if you're relying on employment or jobs, etc., no, it's going to take a long time.
Okay, so I came across this one time. This lady calls us up and says, "I've got my green card. I'm still living in Canada. I haven't made up my mind for sure if I'm going down south." What risk is she at? Because she would still be obligated to file U.S. taxes.
Well, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yep. The only risk she would have is crossing the U.S. border, being interviewed, and having the officer determine whether or not she's abandoned it by living in Canada permanently now. They look at different factors, right? Do you own property here? Do you have a BC car, BC driver's license? Do you file Canadian income taxes? That's de facto right there. If you file as a Canadian tax res, under the tax code and treaty, you can't be a resident of the United States as well. You have to choose one. You can't choose both, right? So those are factors that they could possibly look at. I know if I were the reviewing officer, that's what I'd be looking at.
Okay.
Right? And also intent. Do you intend to come back? She might be saved by the fact that she intends, if the duration hasn't been terribly long, right? Maybe a year or two. But if you're outside of the United States, I believe it's more than 6 months, the presumption is that you've abandoned it. There is a reentry permit that green card holders can apply for, which allows them to re-enter the United States up to a period of 2 years abroad, right? So you're basically putting, in that case, you'd be putting the U.S. government on notice that, yes, you're going to be outside of the country, but you fully intend to return to the United States to reside full time. And it's called a reentry
Now,
permit. It's for green card holders.
I've shared some stories with you on the things that we're dealing with on the wealth management side of people contacting us. You must have hundreds of stories of people just contacting you, wondering where they're at, what risk they're at, because people don't get the proper advice when they're trying to unwind these things.
Well, a lot of times too, people want their cake and they want to eat it too. And oftentimes it just doesn't work, right? You can create a fiction about your story and about facts, but at the end of the day, there's going to be one arbiter of those facts, and that's the guy you're going to be giving your passport and green card to at the border, right? So if that person doesn't buy it, you're not going to be a green card holder for very much longer, right? So again, I mean, if you have to decide, am I going to stay in the United States? If you're going to stay in the United States, then stay. If you're going to be in Canada temporarily, then stay in Canada temporarily. If you intend to make Canada your permanent home, then you're going to have, and you don't want to file U.S. returns, then officially abandon the green card, right? But keep keenly aware of that the 15-year rule, 8 of the 15-year rule, because you don't want it year 9 and then you decide, oh, I don't want my green card. And then all of a sudden you're a covered expat. It's going to cost you $300,000.
We'll be right back. If you enjoy this podcast, my new book is your next step. It's written for Canadian snowbirds who want to better understand the cross-border rules that can impact their time in the U.S., from taxes and healthcare to travel and long-term planning. Visit www.snowbirdsheadingsouth.com to learn more about the book. So when you have these Canadians that go down south, they have their green cards. How many green card holders do you think there are? And why wouldn't they get citizenship? Because it's the same process of renouncing and you're still considered to be a covered or uncovered expat.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't people go through that process if they have a green card holder?
Multiple factors. I've asked Canadians that have been green card holders for years, why don't you take out U.S. citizenship? Oh, I'm a proud Canadian. I don't want to be American. Or I thought I had to give up my Canadian to become an American. I couldn't be a dual citizen. Or they just don't care, right? One way or another. But, if you're a green card holder and you've been in the United States and you're considering moving back to Canada, I would consider getting your U.S. citizenship, right? Because then you'll never be denied entry back into the United States if you in the future want to live 9 months out of the year in the US or permanently, right? Or maybe you move to Canada because you don't quite, you're retired, but you don't quite meet, the Medicare qualifications of being 65, right? So you decide, okay, I'm going to move to Canada. I'm a green card holder in the US. I'm a Canadian citizen. think I'll move back to Canada. I'll jump on the Canadian Medicare. I'll be retired. And when I hit 65 and I qualify for US Med, I'm heading back to the United States. Well, if you don't have a green card, you're not heading back to the US because they'd probably strip you after 5 years, assuming you move back to Canada, say it's 60, have that 5-year window until you're eligible for US social. If you have citizenship before you leave for Canada, you can always come back, no problem. No questions asked. Just present your passport, US passport, and you're in.
Now, you say there's many factors, but do you find that people that you come across is the number one reason? Because my next question would always be, okay, I'm a green card holder. I lived in the United States for the last 30 years. I want to become a citizen. How long would that process take? I know there's an exam you have to write.
Yep. It's going to take probably about a year, start to finish, but it really depends on where in the country you live, right? Some processing centers are quicker than others, right? LA's busy, San Francisco, any of the coastal processing centers are going to take some time. But I think on average, it's about a year, right? But before you do that, you just want to make sure that you're eligible for citizenship. And on the U.S. immigration website, they do have a page that you can determine your eligibility. But safe to say, if you've been a green card holder and you maintained lawful status, you haven't had any DUIs or domestic violence, or criminal felonies, chances are you're going to have absolutely no issues, right?
So I guess the question is that are people under the belief that if I just have a green card, it's going to be easier and cheaper for me to renounce when I fill out all the proper...
Maybe because they're assuming they can just surrender it or abandon it, and there's nothing's going to rub off on them, right?
Okay.
But that's anything but true, right? If you've been a green card more than, X number of years, you better make certain that you're under that threshold. Because the one thing you don't want to do, you don't want to be deemed a covered expat. That's detrimental, especially if you have defined benefits or other deferred compensation, retirement accounts.
Okay, so I'm a Canadian. I elected for whatever reasons not to get my citizenship. Excuse me. I come back to Canada. I surrender. I do all the proper processing. So that's an immigration step. Now, what about tax?
Well, then you would have to file a final U.S. tax return the year you abandoned. So say you abandoned today, March 11th, 2026. So this time next year, we complete U.S. returns called the dual status. It would be a 1040 NR because at the end of 26, the person would no longer be a U.S. person, green card holder for tax purposes. They'd be a non-resident alien. And so we would put together a tax return, possibly an 8854, which is that exit form, if they were a green card holder for more than 7 years, and file it, right? Pick up income on a worldwide basis up through the date of surrender, and any U.S. source income from that date up through the end of the year.
Okay.
And U.S. source income meaning like rental, U.S. rental income from oil and gas, diamond mines, etc. Right? Anything that's from the earth or is attached to U.S. territory, right? That's going to be subject to U.S. tax.
Okay, here's my last question because I know you're a very busy person, and I hope I don't come up with any other questions because I'm
never too busy to answer your questions.
Okay, well, so here I am. I've lived in the States for 40 years. The probability is a lot of people would have children who were born in the States, possibly, and they felt they became U.S. citizens. Now, if I go back to Canada, am I going to have any issues visiting my kids and my grandkids in the States?
No. Yeah, I think it's far. Again, there's absolutely no prohibition. If you were a former green card holder, there won't be any issues, right? Even citizens, former citizens, right, that renounce, never had any issues, right, with any of my.
but I would be restricted as a B2 visitor to
Yeah,
United
to a
States.
certain number of days. You bet.
Okay.
Strangely enough, if you're a former U.S. citizen who renounced, you're prohibited from importing any firearms into the United States. You would have to seek a visa waiver, and it's not an immigration matter. It's alcohol and tobacco firearms, right? Which, obviously the immigration officer is going to enforce, but that's one thing that some folks that renounce, maybe they're, Olympians that are on the shooting team, pistols, rifles, whatever. There's a tournament in the United States, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I was a U.S. person, but I renounced. Can I bring my 22? Can I bring my 22 gun in so I can shoot at the little targets when I have my skis on? It's like, nope.
Okay.
So, yeah, no
Well,
problem. But short of that, I mean, I've never heard of anyone having any issues. The one thing that you want to watch out for, though, is once you renounce your citizenship, you're no longer a U.S. person. So, for example, if you get a DUI in Canada, or you have, say, a domestic assault violation, or aggregated felonies, or misdemeanors, right? Certain misdemeanors, then that can form a bar to reentry into the United States, which would then require, after a certain amount of time, a waiver to reenter the United States. So, if you're an American citizen here in Canada and you got 14 DUIs, no problem. Welcome home, right? But if you're no longer under the auspices of U.S. citizenship and you're a foreign national, you won't get in.
well, once again, I got a full disclaimer, transparency. I'm not going to say that I have any DUIs because I'm not a drinker.
Yeah.
I will on the golf course occasionally. You'll catch me sipping some White Claws or whatever they are.
Oh,
But
that's private property, so you're exempt.
okay. Well, the whole intent of this podcast is not to give free advice. The idea is to make sure we're connecting people with the right professionals, and in this situation, Robert is the right professional. And if you need to reach out to him, he's easy to get a hold of. But Robert, once again, thank you very much for being on the podcast. I appreciate what you guys do for.
My pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure.
It's very valuable, and we can now say that now we just have to go through the understanding of the marketing. But we do have a book coming out for Snowbirds, which is called "The Best of the Snowbirds Expat Radio Podcast: Canadians Heading South. What you don't know will hurt you," and this is in the second book, which is already written, which will be coming out as well too, which is the Canadians Returning Home. What you don't know will hurt you, and that's why it's important to reach out to people like Robert when you have these questions, and engage him with his services. I know they're very expensive, but he's very good. So there was a price.
You get what you pay for.
Like Robert likes to say, you can have your cake and eat it too when you do business with him. So Robert, thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciated. And I know I'm not that far away from you, so I will make a point of the next couple of weeks. Either you two are coming to Qualicum Beach, or I'm going to be heading up to Victoria. So we got to get that.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Straightened away. So thanks again for your time, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much.
Thank you again for listening to the Snowbird Expat Radio Podcast. The best way you can support the podcast is to forward the episode to a friend, and please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Now, before you go, let me leave you with one of my favorite quotes. Be kind to all, the world is small.